What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is your host, Trevor Carlson, and welcome to the Formula Podcast. On the Formula Podcast, we break down and explore the elements of achievement in world-class performers. This week's guests are a couple friends of mine. I've never actually met them in person, but we've exchanged enough emails. I feel like I can call them friends. Darrah Brustein and Tommy Breedlove. On this week's episode, we really dive into what does lifestyle design mean? How do you go about that? They suggest starting out with questioning the norms. When do you sometimes have to do things that aren't a hell yes for you? How do you create boundaries? We dive into all kinds of awesome stuff, just really focusing on the aspect of lifestyle design. I feel like that I can take a lot of different things here, like what does success mean for me? How do I take care of myself? How do I prioritize, my own personal, mental, and physical health? These types of tips from this episode, and I'm sure that there's going to be some really good stuff in here too that you can also apply, to designing your optimal life. Let's get this show started and hand it off to Tommy and Darrah. Today on this episode, I have previous guests Tommy and Darrah. I'd like to say thank you guys for taking the time to show up again and riffing a little bit on. I think we're going to talk about lifestyle design today. So Darrah, if you wouldn't mind kicking this thing off and telling me what lifestyle design means to you.
Thanks, Trevor, and hey, Tommy. So good to be here. Lifestyle design for me has been sort of evolutionary in how I've come to approach it, but as a whole, it means taking the reins and determining what my life's going to look like and doing the work around my own values and the intentional exercise of figuring out what do I really want my life to look like and how do I make sure that my work integrates beautifully into that and that everything I'm doing is working towards that purpose as opposed to letting what often happens my life or other priorities dictate what actually I spend my time on.
Yeah, what about you, Tommy? What does lifestyle design mean to you?
I thought Darrah's answer was amazing. But what's interesting about, I'll start by saying this. When I talk about lifestyle design, I spent 20 years in the financial consulting world and felt like I had zero lifestyle design. I felt like my entire life was managed by other people, and out of that fear mindset and that whole next big deal, next deadline, et cetera, et cetera. And when I turned around and looked at my life, we calculated at one time that if you took the 80 or 90 hour weeks that I was working, there was 10 years of my life that I was working 60 or 70 hours straight, if you kind of divide it in half over lifestyle design. So it's been evolutionary for me too. Part of the reason I left was to get control of my life and to live my value systems. And I think, Trevor, you and I have talked about this. And I think, Darrah, you've talked about this. There's a lot of different people who say it different ways. I think now in all decisions, whether it's business, friendships, family, where I go, who I spend time with, what trips I take, I think it's all about, again, like Darrah said, your value systems, but also in every choice that you make. Is it a hell yes? And if it's that, then do it. If it's that person, then do it. But if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. Don't do that. So that's a little bit of addition to what Darrah had to say. But yeah, it's been an evolution for me, and it's been an amazing journey over the last 7 years.
Tommy, are there times when, even though it's not a hell yes, you feel like you have to do it? Or what? I guess when I'm thinking about some situations that pop up there, I'm like, man, this isn't a hell yes for me, but I feel like I need to do this. Do those situations come up for you? And if so, how do you deal with them?
They do come up for me even today, especially, I got to say it, around family. But what I do now is I slowly, especially when it's old friendships that I think just need to dwindle and die. Not that I don't love these people or have compassion for these people. It's just we're evolving in different directions. And so there's these long-term friendships that I have and other business acquaintances that I have that I don't want to be cold or non-compassionate. But I let it slowly. I don't see them as much as I used to. It's more limited time. And then eventually those relationships and or those interactions happen less and less. Because as we continue to do this work and evolve in life, more and more people of like mind kind of attract to you. And so I really don't want to spend my time with folks who spend a lot of time in that judgment, talk about politics nonstop, us versus them nonstop. I just can't do all that because I can only control what I control and affect what I can affect. And I want to be positive to each person I interact with. And if I feel like someone's draining me in life, I have to almost be dogmatic about it. So the answer to that, Trevor, is yes, I still have those interactions, but I would say they're getting less and less as I really dwindle them down over life.
Tommy, I think your response is really wonderful, and I'm glad you asked that follow-up question, Trevor, because my next question to you then, Tommy, would be, tell us how you practically say no to those people.
No, that's a good question. Darrah, I'm going to use you as an example. I made a connection to Darrah. Actually, I'm a client of this particular individual, and I thought they would get along well, and I was 100% wrong on that. And so during that coffee meeting, Darrah, I don't know how long it was, and maybe you can answer, and then I'll answer your question first, is during that meeting, I've got to tell you guys something funny here in a minute that I've totally screwed up on recently. It's within the last 3 days, and it's related to Darrah's question. So sometimes it's not very graceful. But within that meeting, Darrah, I think you called me afterward and you're like, look, I don't know why you thought this was a good recommendation for a network guy, but we just did not hit it off. And I decided about 10 minutes into it, nope, this is not for me. And you got up and left. And I was like, okay, Darrah, you're my hero. So I know for a fact that you've done that in the past. And let me tell you, sometimes it's not so graceful. And I actually regret that this happened. There was a young lady in Atlanta that I'm somewhat of a mentor for. She's going through a lot professionally, personally. She's from the Northeast. And we decided to meet at a big marketplace in Atlanta to have a cup of coffee and just chat. And this was honestly last Thursday or something. And during that meeting, it was just, she hated Atlanta. She hated people. No one was smart enough. And it was just draining. I was like, can we talk about something a little more positive? She goes, well, for me to be honest, you have to want to hear it. You have to be open to my honesty. I was like, there's a difference between honest and negative. And she just kept going, and then she was starting to insult me. And I swear to you guys, I said this, and I should not have done it. I was like, yeah, I've got this rule in life that if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And right now, this conversation is not even borderline yes for me. And it really upset her, and she got up and left, and I haven't heard from her since. And I really regret that.
Yeah.
Because I should have been able to navigate that a little more gracefully, and I'm sure it hurt her feelings. But at the same time, I'm just like, I took my time out to come see you. Why is the whole world caving? And I'm regretful because I didn't have the empathy and compassion for that. What I've been able to do, though, to answer your question, Darrah, and then I'll stop talking, is it's really usually the connections I make are through an executive assistant. And so there's subtle delays that you put in the times that you meet, and then you meet for shorter and shorter time periods. And over time, the relationship just kind of closes on its own. But you're always responsive. You're always, hey, I'm sorry we can't meet. And it's not dishonest. It's not dishonest in any way. It's just you're let it slowly, the relationship slowly die down in a graceful manner that wasn't like what I did to that young lady the other day. But it's hard sometimes because people just don't want to let go. And if it gets to that point to where there's a conversation that needs to happen, then it will happen. But 9 out of 10 times it doesn't have to happen. But sometimes you do have to have that difficult conversation.
Yeah, Trevor, if I may, I want to add on to that because I think what Tommy's saying is so critical, especially this example of the young woman where her perspective and mindset were so inundated with negativity that no matter what you had said or done and how positive or graceful you had stayed, that's probably where she was locked in her journey at that moment. So yes, there was probably a better way to handle it in that second. However, understandingly, you got to the outcome that you got to with her. And I think there's an important takeaway there as well, that while you may have erred a bit, what you can only do is control how you act in that situation. And I think what trips me up, and I can imagine trips up other people, so hopefully this will be valuable, is that there can often be the fear of really standing up for creating the boundaries around where you say yes and where you say no, because there's so much anxiety around how the person on the other side is going to take it. And this is a constant battle for me where even if I am being as clear, as genuine, and even as graceful or sympathetic as I can be in an interaction or a communication that will ultimately be a reason for me to say no, I still hold on to the anxiety around, is that person going to think that I'm better than them, or I think I'm better than them, or that I'm too good, or that I am just so busy and that I'm, just whatever their story is going to be. And I continue to have to combat that for myself, to say, all I know is that my own integrity is this, and this is how I'm showing up. And if I can stay in alignment with it being from a good place and knowing that I'm trusting what I'm doing, that it's up to them how they translate and interpret that. And that usually actually has nothing to do with me at all, but that's a struggle. And so I wrote a piece, Trevor, if you want to share it with the community, for Forbes, on a rejection that Brene Brown sent me. That was one of the most graceful rejection emails I've ever received. And I've offered it as a framework for other people to use to say no to people in a way that feels authentic to you, but also is empathetic. And then have also been trying to create other email templates or stopgaps, sort of like Tommy said, with an executive assistant, to help prevent some of those people who are going to take from you or be presumptuous about your time without you having to say no in a hurtful way.
I actually read that that article that you wrote. I was really impressed by, well, one, how she handled this situation, and then two, how you really approached it, because I think that there are a lot of people like, so Tommy, your situation where you were like, this conversation is not even close to a yes for me. There are certain people that are going to hear that, and then they're going to be like, well, Tommy's just a jerk. He's just like everybody else. He's not, it's your fault. And then there are people where, like how Brene Brown handled it, where she was just like, I can't, or how you handled it, Darrah, where you were just like, okay, well, this is a learning and growing experience. How can I learn from this or do better? So it's interesting to see like the polar, like the two ends of the spectrum just in this conversation. So the question...
Well, really, I was going to say really quickly to Tommy's point, it's exactly that then helps attract to you the people that are really of like-mindedness that you want to bring around you, as opposed to the people that are going to have that negative reaction. And while it's not an awesome moment to have, it also is a really great division point and self-selection tool.
And I totally agree with that. By the way, Brene Brown is my number one person to meet. I don't know whether to hug her or to, I tell you, I read more of her stuff. I cry 30% of the time. I laugh 30% of the time. And then the other percentage of the time, I feel like she's writing directly to me. I feel like I just love her work. And so the fact that you brought her up is awesome. And something that's related to all of this is I want to make sure I clarify something. This particular person was just saying that I'm being honest. And I'm a huge fan of transparency, and I'm a huge fan of honesty. But I felt that she was being very cruel. So you can be honest with someone without being cruel to the other person, to a group of people, to a city, whatever it might be. And I felt that her honesty, albeit maybe it was transparent, but it was cruel. And I'm going to quote Brene. I think Brene in one of her books says cruelty is, it's cheap, easy, and chicken shit. And so it's really important, even though that people can be honest and transparent, but you can be honest and transparent without being cruel, judging, jealous, etc. So I think that was important to that particular transaction. But I will admit, I should have, I don't like the word should. I got to be careful of that word. I needed to handle that better for both myself and her. So I'll just kind of throw that in there too.
Yeah, if you could go, if you could go back, how would you wish you have handled it? For I'm thinking about the people that maybe face these situations in like a management position on a regular basis. How would you ideally have approached that situation?
I would have turned it back to me and not her, and not the conversation, because I felt the way I handled that, it was this conversation, i.e. you aren't a hell yes for me right now, and that can be very hurtful. And that is not what I want to be about. I needed to turn it back toward me and know that I had a very tough week, business-wise, personal-wise, and maybe I wasn't in the best space. And I could have said, I'm being very careful not to say her name, that right now, because of the week I've had and where I'm at, I need a little bit more time, empathy, compassion. And I feel right now this conversation will lead me, Tommy, to a place both emotionally and mentally that I don't want to be at. So can we either shift the conversation to help me, or is it okay if we postpone this to where I'm in a better state of mind to have this conversation with you? Whether or not that actual conversation would ever happen again, I needed to turn it back to me and be honest with my feelings, my emotional and mental well-being, and not make it about her, the conversation. That's what I would have done better.
Yeah, I think that's a really good approach to it, and I'm guilty. I'm sure everybody else listening to this is guilty too of, when you have those days where things are, not exactly, things haven't gone smoothly recently, or you're just tired or whatever, and maybe you don't handle a situation as well as you would have liked to ideally. So I don't think anybody can really blame you for like, not taking a step back and handling it the best ideal way. My question I have for both you and Darrah, if you want to take this one first, is I want to ask where, like, okay, when you're dealing with these interactions on a regular basis, or let's say you're dealing with someone at work, maybe a boss that has this type of attitude or a negative attitude, or is always in the whole, like, they're very cruel or angry, or they're always pointing fingers. How do you approach those situations from a positive mindset, from a like, I want to say like an adult, but I don't think that's the right term. Do you guys follow where I'm going with this?
Are you asking how do you handle with compassion or empathy someone who's coming at you negatively?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Can I just I'm just going to rephrase that question like that, and then
Yeah.
I'll cut out my ramblings, but
Sure.
I think the ramblings were awesome, dude.
Oh, well, maybe I'll just leave them. Yeah, actually, you know what? Let's just roll with it. We'll just go with it, because I think that the more authentic that it sounds, the better. So,
Right.
So Darrah, would you like to take first swing at that question?
Sure. So I think a little bit of this we touched on with Tommy's last situation that he laid out. And it's exactly that I'm not going to be perfect in every situation. And there's a lot of times that it might trigger in me a negative response, and I might not be able to show up in the empathetic or compassionate way that I'd hope to. However, I think a lot of it is just me doing the self-care work on myself, so that whatever situation I face during the day, I can hopefully have a little bit of pause in my brain between my instinctive trigger perhaps and then what actually comes out of my mouth. And for me, and I would venture to guess for Tommy, this is the same, knowing him, that meditation is a huge part of that. And if I haven't gotten enough sleep, if I don't feel like hydrated and fed, if I don't feel like I've centered myself for some amount of meditation time that day, it's going to be a lot harder for me to be that person in those situations, especially if they're piling up. But in general, I'd say those are the tools that I use to get me to the frame of mind to be that way. And then usually I'll try to reframe or talk back in a way that, like, if they're saying something negative, I can reframe it in a positive or restructure it. And then, much to Tommy's example of me with his friend that he set me up with to have a meeting that I felt was really not fitting, that at some point or another, you just kind of have to stand up for yourself and not be combative, but simply say, it's been a pleasure, and extract yourself in some way for some reason and keep it moving.
I love that answer. And she's spot on. So one of the biggest gifts for me from meditation standpoint is not being reactionary, but being proactive and not reactive, and being able to take that pause so that I don't get to where they're at. So one of the triggers for me from someone who was very much bullied as a young boy, I have to be careful not to become the bully. And so what I have to be careful at, and I do so much meditation, self-work, I think she said it best, if I got to be hydrated, rested, and I do a lot of work on me as well, so that I can serve myself in my value system, but also serve others. And so I think meditation has just been massive for me in my life, in helping me to be balanced, be present, and not get into a reactionary state. Related to that, though, I do have to set an example. It is all about boundaries. And there are times, and there's got to be a compassionate, graceful way to do this, but there's got to be times that you set pretty stern boundaries. And I'll give you a very, very close to home example. I have a sister that's 10 years older than me, and very recently, our mom is very, very sick, and she is not handling it very well, understandably. I get it. I totally get that. But she got to where she was sending me some pretty atrocious texts late at night. And they were shaming texts. They were cruel texts. They were mean texts. It just weren't things that were appropriate. And she was doing it in the mask of text, which people also do in email, which is easier than to be mean to someone face to face. And finally, I had to call her and tell her enough's enough, and let her know that she's not my mom. I'm craving a relationship with my sister. We're both going through the same thing. We're handling it very different ways. But and I'll just use her name, Tracy, I have to tell you that if this continues, I will have to write you off in my life. I can't have you. Because if I allow you to be this abusive to me, then I'm abusing myself. And so I'm not going to allow you to abuse me. I'm not going to allow you to bully me. And I'm sorry, I'm getting real personal here, but this is true. I mean, there are times that you have to call a spade, draw the boundary, say, I love you. I don't want it to happen this way, especially with a family member, but I'm not going to allow you to say these things to me. And she heard it. She understood it. She appreciated where I'm going. And since then, the last 4 months have been amazing. But there are times that you have to draw very strict boundaries, whether it's with your family, whether it's with a significant other, or where it's with business. You can meet them where they're at. You can reframe the question. You can know that they're a human being. And chances are, if they're coming from a place of meanness or cruelty, they're struggling with a lot of things, and who knows what's going on in their life right now. And so you're compassionate and empathetic, but you got to be boundary driven with that. And sometimes you have to be dogmatic and say, no, we're not going to do this anymore. I can't allow you to do this, because eventually you're allowing it to happen. And so I just wanted to personalize that a little bit and add my perspective to it.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, Tommy. And I'm sorry to hear you guys are going through that with your mom. Yeah. Because one, you and I apparently both had this bully tendency and had that ability as kids and had to learn to outgrow that. And then secondly, too, I think when we really boil it down, we're saying a lot of what we learned are exactly what we learned in kindergarten or teach a child, which is like cover these basic human needs so that you're at least in the best state you can be in to enter into a situation, have empathy and compassion. And then if someone's bullying you, stand up to them, because they're going to stop and they're going to back down and they're going to respect you. And that all just continues, but we've just complicated it as we've gotten older.
A lot of what I'm hearing from both of you, I have like all these quotes that are coming to mind, and one's from like a friend of mine. I went through like a breakup and a failed venture or project, and like all this stuff within like a short period of time. And I remember I walked into my friend's office. He owns a company here in town, and I sat down. He's like, "Man, you look like shit." I'm like, "Yeah, I feel like shit." He's like, if you take care of yourself, everything else will take care of itself. And I just kind of sat there and I was like, damn, you're right. And then, as soon as I took care of myself, like I was like, I'll just pump back the hours a little bit, just kind of take the pressure off, do some self-work, and then, I'll go back to working normal. And I can't tell you how much of an impact taking that time and just like focusing on my self-work. Like it was strange. It was like I worked less on like the venture I was working on at that point in time, and I worked more on myself, like just reading, meditating, yoga, acro yoga. I was taking like dance class, improv class, all that stuff. It's like I was working the least amount I'd worked in probably years, but the amount of quality work I was able to produce during that time and immediately after was awesome. So I think that the whole self-work thing is really, really important and shouldn't be understated, especially to anybody out there who's like, well, I worked until 2 a.m. last night and I worked 85 or 100 hours last week. It's like, if you just took a step back, maybe spent 10 of those hours just working on yourself, you'd be surprised how big of an impact it would have on your ability to crank out like high quality work consistently from there on. Would you guys? You're getting
me fired up, because this is precisely what I believe about lifestyle design and intention, is that you have to break these status quo norms and question what we are being told, that wearing this badge of 70 to 100 hour weeks and busyness is commendable, and that grind and burnout and hustle and sleep when you're dead are the things that we should all be striving for and hoping to attain. And that just because you fill a lot of hours doesn't mean you're actually being efficient or productive, or that in taking care of yourself that it's selfish and you need to always be considering everyone else. But you have nothing to give if your cup isn't full. So I think that you're the perfect example. And this is exactly what my hypothesis always estimated when I'd show up to an office in my early years of work and just be forced to hustle through a day, fill hours meaninglessly, stretch out tasks because I was supposed to be there, And then when I started working for myself, recognizing I could do the same amount of thing in a limited number of hours, and then also have time to replenish myself and give back in other ways, that felt much better. I was more productive, created better outcomes, and made more money.
I totally agree with all that. It's interesting what we do as a society. And I think it is a badge of honor for a lot of folks. And I think we're trained, ye who turns the lights off last wins, right? And that's never true. And that 15, 16-hour a week or hour a day things, it's completely unsustainable. And if you look really deep underneath it, and I don't want to get too woo-woo, there is some sort of, in order for me to feel worthy, I need to outwork you. And I'm chasing this thing called perfection or success that honestly at the end of the day doesn't even exist, and you're never going to get there. So I would your listeners who are doing that grind, who are caught in that, that entrepreneurial lifestyle, I've got to work and sleep when you're dead, I think Darrah said, that's completely unsustainable and it's nonsense. And at the end of the day, I think you guys said it best. It's amazing to me. And the first thing I always put on the burner is myself. And it's the worst decision I can make. And if I put myself on the burner, whether it's exercise or my meditation practice or the readings that I do or taking time for quiet, get out in nature, walk my dog, and or spend it with my significant other, if I put those things on the shelf, everything else suffers for that. And it's amazing to me, and I think you guys both said it, when I take care of myself, both from a health standpoint, emotional standpoint, and mental standpoint, and I do work an hour or two on this a day, that what I can accomplish in 2 or 3 hours is unbelievably more, it's just so much more impactful than what I could do if I wasn't doing that, working 12 hours a day. So I'm in complete agreement. I've lived both sides of it. And even when I was in the big corporate finance job, before I went through this whole, some people call it hitting rock bottom. I'll choose to call it a spiritual awakening at 36 years old. Before I did that, before that 36-year-old benchmark, I was working, I'm not kidding, that 80 or 90-hour week, and I dropped it down to 30. And from a money standpoint, from the team I recruited standpoint, from title standpoint, status standpoint, everything was just flowing so much better because the quality of the work and the quality of the relationships that we were building, because I was taking care of myself. The tangible benefits were just almost incomprehensible. It was like 2 to 1 compared if you do it before or after. It was really amazing.
Tommy, I want to ask you a follow-up question because you talked about success. What does success mean for you?
Success for me, is living my truth, living my value systems, and not compromising my dignity or integrity out of fear or caring what other people think, and not compromising my relationships and value systems. Because and I'm just speaking for me, I felt like for more than 36 years of my life, and I'm 43 now, so 36 years of my life, I felt like I compromised my dignity, my choices, because I was living out this fear and worthiness thing. I might have externally looked like I had the watch and car and the American dream and the big house and the pretty wife and all that nonsense. Pretty wife's kind of important. I'll go with that because I still really like her.
She is pretty.
Yeah, she's pretty, but she's pretty badass too. She's just amazing.
Yep.
But, all that other stuff, it was never going to fulfill me because I was the guy in the room. Yeah, I might have had the title. I might have been the partner, but I always felt alone and I always felt unworthy. And so success for me is falling in love with myself, feeling worthy, and feeling that I'm making choices and decisions in my life based on my heart and how I would want to be treated from others. And if I do that, both for myself and others, I feel like I will have lived a successful life. And so that's what I think success is. But Darrah, since you and I are tight, by the way, I would love to hear your definition of success as well.
Thank you for sharing yours. And I so appreciate so much of this vulnerability you're laying down here. It's so good to hear. But for me, success, it's been an evolution. And historically, it's always been freedom of my time and how I spend it. That really, I guess, is underpinned with once I was making enough residual income to finance the life that I want, which I had mapped out many years ago and assigned dollar values to what I wanted my life to look like. So I knew exactly what I needed to make to be financially free. And then in exchange, knew what I was working towards. And then once I hit that, it really became this next step of, okay, well, if it's not just how I spend my time and having the freedom to choose, what is more than that? And it really then goes into a lot of what you're saying, Tommy, which for me is feeling fully expressed, that my gifts and who I am, that I'm really pouring out into the world, and don't feel like whenever I end my time in this capacity on this planet that I wasted that.
Both of you guys are giving really good answers for the definition of success. So I have a follow-up to both of you, and that is, if someone approached you, which I'm sure this probably happens every once in a while, and they asked you, okay, I see you living this lifestyle. I see you, doing all this self-care, and I see your results. I want the same thing. Where do I start?
Darrah, you want to start?
I was about to say. I was about to just say.
Should we do paper, rock, scissors?
Yeah. That's so funny. Go ahead, Tommy.
Well, where you have to start is you have to start taking some action. What I would say to that particular person, this is my answer, and this is for me, and each human being on earth is different. And each definition of success and ambition and happiness is going to be different. So you just have to understand that and know that you're not alone in this search for, happiness, success, freedom. I think Darrah, if you overlined hers would be freedom. And I think we all crave that as human beings. And so knowing you're not alone, but you got to be willing to do the work. In my opinion, there's no magic pill. There's no person coming in on a horse. You have to participate in your own rescue, and you've got to take action. And I think you have to have the machine running at full capacity. And I think your physical health is extremely important. Your mental health is extremely important, and your emotional health is. And you got to work on all fronts on those things, and you've got to do the work. So whether it's investing your time into meditation or a formal mastermind group or a formal coach that helps to hold you accountable to these things to get you moving in the right direction of that happiness, freedom, success, and really helping you find meaning in life. And there's a lot of different tools in the toolbox. I'm sure Darrah has a million of them, but I would say, first of all, knowing you're not alone, be willing to put yourself out there. And I call it showing up naked. I mean, be willing to be vulnerable with yourself and saying, this is what I believe, and I'm not going to compromise it. I'm not going to let the noise, opinions, and judgments of society get in my way, because I'm going to find happiness. So being willing to get out there and do the work, investing in yourself, investing in your mental health, emotional health, and taking that time each and every day. There's 100 tools that I could give to you, but you got to be willing to do the work in order to get there. Because even to this day, even though I spend so much time, this is also what I do for a living. I help people achieve meaning and balance and work in their zone of brilliance, all that stuff. That's part of what I help entrepreneurs and leaders do. But you've got to be able to ready to take the courage to do the risk and then do the actual work. And for me, the reason I spend so much time on me is because this is a lifelong journey. I will never, ever reach the end game. And I don't even know what the end game is, but I'm going to work really hard to be the best person that I can be each and every day.
Awesome.
That was a great answer. Darrah, what do you got?
Well, great. I also agree with Tommy and think that probably the next component for me would be, once you feel like you have some stabilization of those things, ideally being in meditation and doing some of the self-care, you will have flashes of, here's what I want, here's what I don't want. So you can start figuring out where to take action. And then Tommy is correct. I do have a lot of tools around how do you do some of this assessment and self-diagnosing to determine, well, how do I want to spend my time if I'm working towards freedom, or how do I even want to get to that freedom state or to my definition of success in and of itself. So I have tools that I've created around questions to ask people in your life to help you determine your path based on how they see you, your strengths, your weaknesses, your just your unique factors, all of these things. Certain things like I talked about of setting these intentions and goals with timelines and dollar values. So you know how, when, why, how much, all of that is associated with where you're going. And a number of other things that'll really help you move through the process with intention and a mapping, so that you have some idea of where you're going. And then once you have that idea, there is a part of the non-attachment of letting some of it go and knowing that your ideals might change, your desires might change, and that's okay. But there has to be some action and some non-attachment to the outcomes to know that part of the fun is in the figuring out of that.
And so I'm going to add to that a little bit too. Darrah actually, and I don't know if this was one of your Forbes articles or some of your other writings, but Darrah, I read one of her articles recently, and I just found the questions that it was basically this series of questions that you could ask people that you really trust and people who in your inner circle network who believe in you and who have your best interest. Ask them these certain very tough questions about yourself. Because I think even to this day, sometimes what I see in the mirror and what I'm portraying out into the world is maybe not what others are seeing. And so being able, again, to get yourself out there and to really, and Darrah, I would love for you to share that article with his audience as well. It's just an amazing, amazing piece of work, and it's amazing questions. And I constantly ask people to give me the feedback from those answers, because it really, and it's not about judging or beating yourself up. You've got to have thick skin, but you got to be really ready and willing to change. And what are the things that I can continue to work on to be the human, the man, the leader that I want to be? And she shared that with me, and I sent it to my inner circle, including Darrah. Darrah, you answered them for me as well.
I did.
And it really makes you feel good about a lot of the work you're doing, but also is like, wow, I never saw that. And I need to, continue to sharpen the pencil and work on that. So I would love for you, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot there. It just was really impactful for my life, my personal practice, the Choose Goodness movement, my relationships. And so I think I think Darrah has some amazing tools that she can share with your folks.
Thanks, Tommy. And I think the other component to that, outside of just you can't see the spot on which you stand, and it allows your inner circle to reflect that back on you. Similarly, at least in my case, it helped me see places that I took for granted that I didn't necessarily see them as gifts or as unique things that I possessed that could be shared or developed on and given more of in the world, because they came so naturally to me. I didn't even recognize them as things. And so in some cases, when you see a pattern that way, it makes you pause and think, oh, maybe there's something here.
Yeah. I find that to be one of the biggest challenges for me is when, you get that constant feedback or or compliments, like the same compliment from different people from different circles. And you're just like, oh yeah, no, I just do that every day. It's easy. It's like, but being able to recognize that you have those strengths, right? Or maybe it's like recognizing where maybe you're a little weak and you could use some self-work. It's all interesting stuff, because there are some times when you get that information from maybe your inner circle or from other people, and at first you're like, there's no way that's true. Like whether it's a compliment or it's like you need to do some work here. And you're like, there's no way. Like you're just wrong, right? And then when you take that time to kind of like sit down, maybe you journal, or maybe it's while you're meditating and you think about it and you're like, is there any way that could be right? Like, is there something I'm missing here? And then when you take that time to really like to look at it and question, like, is it a possibility, or is there something I could work on here? I just think those are really interesting points you guys are bringing up.
And that's where the work comes in. That's the hardest part of it, Trevor. I think you've hit it on the head, and that's where the self-work of a mental and emotional stability comes in, and meditation and a million other tools is we are our own worst critics. Every human being on earth. I mean, there's a joke that one of my mentors used to tell me is don't make fun of me. That's my job. And so when you get this kind of feedback from people, and you're not doing the inner work, the emotional work, the mental work, and just being able to love and have compassion and respect for yourself as well. When you get certain feedback, especially if it's critical, or not really critical is the wrong word, if it's just meant to be constructive and help you, you've got to know that this person has your best interest and is not trying to get one up on you or judge you, because and you've got to be careful not to judge yourself. And so that's where all of this stew, this whole thing is just one big system, right? One big organism that we call life. It's all got to be working together and in balance. And so that's where you have to do this work that Darrah and I and yourself are talking about in order to get to that place to where you're comfortable putting yourself out there and getting that feedback.
Yeah, it's not always easy to get that feedback, but it seems to be like when that feedback, for me at least, I don't know if this is true with the both of you, when the feedback hurts the most or you feel it the most, that's when I tend to find out that it's true. like, or there's some truth to it and I know it's true, but it's like that initial reaction is like, oh, no way, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Totally. Darn it, that's where I gotta go. I gotta dig in deep there. Here we go again. Yeah,
Right.
Totally, man. Totally. I love it.
Yeah, so one of the things that we were talking about before we jumped onto the call was your guys' network, or as you guys call it, your brain trust. Do one of you two want to tell me how you formed your brain trust and, some of the benefits that you've seen coming from having such a strong one where you guys are located in Atlanta?
Sure. So for me, my brain trust, so to speak, is just a loose term for the people that are in my life that I spend the most time with. It's not formal. It's not, delineated in any way. And it's been completely a mutable process. It's been changing over time, whereby, no matter where you are in your life, you have some sort of network or community. And as I got older, and perhaps I'd say maybe my mid to late 20s, I started recognizing that I didn't have enough people in my life who were living and going through the same path that I was dreaming to create. And instead I was, surrounded by people who were lovely and wonderful, but they were living very different lives. And I needed to find them. And so I set out on a very intentional journey to find communities or individuals who were creating lives of their own design and who were doing that with intention and like-mindedness. And I could walk alongside or even watch them light years beyond in the journey. So they could either be a peer or an aspirational peer. And when I set that intention out, the floodgates opened, and they weren't all in Atlanta. And that's part of the beauty of the era we live in, where it doesn't quite matter. Part of why I travel as much as I do, which is 60% or so of every month, is because I want to put myself in the places where these people are and keep myself on my toes and constantly be challenging myself, learning and growing. But once I set that intention, they just came in, and one begot another. And it's just crazy to me now that because of this, I found myself friends with people and in rooms that I once would have thought were implausible or impossible. And now it's very commonplace. And by doing this, it really does enhance what is possible for you and what you think is a foundational baseline, because everyone else is doing the same thing and they're bringing you along with them and elevating your perspectives and what you can do. You're doing it together. So it's a constant evolution. And I've been grateful to have Tommy here in Atlanta to be one of them.
I appreciate that. And I totally agree with all that. And I'm going to maybe throw a little kink in all this, Trevor, is I honestly can't explain it. There's universal forces. Some people call it God. Some people call it universal intelligence, energy. I mean, we can call it a lot of different things. And I know that sounds foo-foo, but I, in my heart and soul, believe this, because I'm just like I think gravity is a very real, tangible thing. I think the law of attraction is a very real, tangible thing. And that it's not about status and money, and some of that stuff is important, especially if you have, I think the three people on this call are very ambitious business-wise. I mean, you kind of want to be around those like-minded people. But what I have found is that, that the first 36 years is when I was living from that place of fear or insecurity or worthiness or darkness, that's what I was attracting around me. And then when I got honest with myself, transparent with myself, owned my stuff, and put it out there in a boundary-driven way. I mean, I'm not going to just emotionally vomit on everybody I meet, but what I am going to do is be me and know that that's good enough. And from a business standpoint, a professional standpoint, a friendship standpoint, my family relationships, what's attracting in my life, it's almost unexplainable. And I think Darrah hit it on the head when she says the rooms that all of a sudden that you're sitting in with the people that maybe at one time that you thought, hey, that wasn't even attainable, becomes more the norm. It's remarkable that if you're putting positive vibes and energy out there, if you are constantly sharpening the pencil to become that human being that you want to become, the universe really conspires to help you. And I know that sounds really foo-foo, but I have lived it, man. And I don't even know how to, it's almost undescribable. It awes me sometimes. I'm like, why in the world am I even getting invited to that? And the craziest thing happens. And I don't want to say their name, I spent a lot of time working with these peacock, really tough guy, alpha male dudes to help them find meaning and balance their life and become the men they want to be. And some of the most amazing things happened to me is there's a huge kind of almost celebrity type coach calls me up for advice, and I'm like, oh my God, you're really calling me for advice? He goes, yeah. So it's just remarkable how these things will manifest in your life by just being you and being honest and being that person we talked about. And so I really can't explain it. I think Darrah did an amazing job explaining it. And it's a belief system, it's a worthiness system, and it's a transparency thing. And I think that whatever's out there that keeps the keeps the earth circling around the sun will conspire to help you, as long as you believe you're worthy and you're honest with yourself and you're putting good intentions out there. I think just amazing things will happen for you.
The worthiness thing, I think that could stand to have a second look, because that's exactly what held me back for so long, and it's still an Achilles heel for me, is I'm not good enough, or someone else is better, or why do I deserve to be there? And for me, it was baby steps to just test that and brush up against it and lean into that discomfort enough to start realizing, okay, I can push a little further and a little further and a little further. Whereas for other people, it might be something they don't struggle with. But that's exactly it. Like, you have to be your own biggest cheerleader and your own biggest fan. And these opportunities are going to match you where you are.
Man, you guys are giving me goosebumps with all this stuff, because Darrah, as you kind of said that about the worthiness thing, and you as well, Tommy. That's, I mean, man, that was probably still is my biggest. I'm gonna steal your term, Darrah. My biggest Achilles heel, because it just seemed like the environment that I grew up in or around, and then some of the people I spent my time around through my early years in college. I didn't have like a high sense of self-worth. So when like I do get these good opportunities, like you were talking about, Tommy, that come up, I'm like, are you sure? I'm like, you got the right person.
Right. Hello, is this on?
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I totally get it.
And then on top of that, it's like, when no one else is around and those opportunities aren't coming up, it's that inner conversation where it's like, I kind of want to do this. And then you have that voice in the back of your head. That's me personally, when I was struggling more with the worthiness thing, it was like, well, but can you do that? I'm like, man, I believe in everybody else more than I believe in myself. But it's something that I think once you do get that part sorted out, that really opens up the rest of the doors for you, because it's once you realize that, there's no one that's stopping me or you or anybody else from doing this other than ourselves. And that belief that we can do it is like step one.
Well, and once you peek behind the curtain, to Tommy's earlier point, you realize that everyone, no matter their stature or how much you put them on a pedestal, struggles with the same thing. And so why not you two? Why don't you also step into that world with them?
I totally agree with that. And knowing, you guys both just mentioned, I think one of you guys said it was your Achilles heel, and the other said, I still struggle with this. And as do I. And I think the majority of human beings on this world, it's this journey of life and of worthiness and of self-belief and self-love. And getting, it's a constant, you got to work on it. You got to notice it. You got to know when those, demons or smoke or whatever that come up, these gremlins that we have in our brain, for lack of a better word, because they will continue to come up, especially as ambitious, success-driven people. The bigger the room, even then you're like, okay, do I need to be even a bigger room? And we got to be careful of that, always looking outside of us and across the room, and just continue to look back in and know, yep, I am worthy to be here. There's a reason you're invited. Believe, breathe into it, and move forward. But knowing that everyone, I don't want to speak for everyone, but the majority of human beings on this earth struggle from the same things. We all want to be seen, heard, loved, flourish, and respected, and we all want that. And as we continue to grow, those worthiness issues are always going to come up, and just know they're there, and just breathe into it and feel the fear and do it anyway, man. So I think we're hitting some really good stuff here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting how those beliefs or mindsets that we have kind of manifest themselves or come to fruition or play out in real life. Because it's like even when I started the show, Darrah, you were lucky enough to be one of the first guests when I was still butchering my way through through the interviews. And it was even when I started, like in the back of my mind, I was like, am I actually am I good enough to do a podcast? I don't know. And then like I started doing it, and then I feel like I've gotten a little bit better since then. But I think what happened along the way is and talking with other podcasters is like my mindset kind of changed a little bit, where it was this is what everyone else is doing and going through. This is where everyone else started. So, you just have to keep going and keep practicing, and you keep putting in the time, and eventually you kind of look in the mirror and you're like, oh yeah, no, actually I can do this. I'm more than capable. I'm capable. And it's all something, it just takes time.
Time and work. I think you hit it right on the head. Just keep working at it.
That needs to be put on like a poster somewhere or something. Just put in the time, keep working, and believe in yourself, and everything will work out in one way or the other. Maybe not the way that you initially plan, but it'll work out for the best.
But I'm a believer too. The message is there when you want to hear it, and I mean, we can say all those things and put all these things into practice. And I think the people on this particular, this podcast and interview do the work. We put in the time, and we know the value and importance of it. But did I tell you this, Trevor? And I don't think, Darrah, I don't think you know this. I got this email from a woman in the UK that I used to have a professional relationship with. And she's sending me like her personal life's in shambles, her professional life's in shambles, because it is one big stew, right? And she's like, I need your advice. I need your help, but don't give me that guru crap. And I'm like, well, the message is there when you're ready to hear it. And it's not guru nonsense. It's not touchy-feely woo-woo. It's life stuff. And there's a reason it's out there. And so there's got to be a willingness to be there. There's got a willingness to show up and ready to put yourself out there and do it. So, I think it's a combination of a lot of different things.
Yeah, sorry, Darrah. I wasn't sure if you're going to time in there.
Oh, so no, I was just letting you go. Yeah.
I was like, there's like this awkward second where I'm like,
right.
Am I going to say what I want to say? So
no, Tommy got that.
Yeah, you nailed it. So the original question was talking about your brain trust, and Darrah, you talked a bit about, you said something like you went out to like look for these specific types of people. And I guess this is mainly for you, but if you want to jump in, if somebody approached you and said, okay, this is who I want in my network, these are the types of people I want to be surrounded by, how do I find them? What would you tell them?
Well, I'd say first start being that person. Make sure that you are that person. And then secondly, I'd just say go out into the world giving as much value as you can to everyone that you encounter, and don't ask questions and don't ask for anything in return. And that will start to build such a strong reputation for you that doors will start opening. And then when opportunities present themselves, like for me, a real turning point was being a part of an organization called the Young Entrepreneurs Council. Someone posted to our private Facebook group and said several years ago, hey guys, I'm doing pro bono PR for this really cool organization who brings young leaders to emerging cities, and they want someone to write a press piece on it. Who wants to go? And I looked it up and felt like, oh my gosh, these are the exact type of people that I've been looking to meet, and they're going to Detroit and I've never been there and it sounds cool. And I write and I'm a press person. So all of these things commingle. So to Tommy's vernacular earlier, it was a hell yes. And this was literally like shortly after I put it out in the universe and said, I need to find these people no matter where they are. So I went, and that organization called Breakout, which now Tommy is also a part of, has been the gateway for me to so many other places and people like that. And so I did the work. I was that person. I added value and continued to add value. I came into that organization ready to add value by writing a piece for them. And then from there, just so much has spun out of it.
I really honestly can't add to that. This is Darrah's world. This is her expertise. I mean, she's built entire companies based on what she just spoke about. And I think number one and two, and again, it goes back to belief, but being that person and knowing that you're worthy to be that person, and then putting yourself out there to serve without expectation. Those are harder said. I mean, those are harder to do than you think. And so if you can do one and two of what she just said, and it's this entire interview is kind of led up to that. If you can do one and two, the things that'll manifest in your life are just almost unbelievable.
Well, and the worthiness thing really plays into the value adding component, whereby a piece of feedback I hear all the time, like I started a movement accidentally called Give It Forward, where we're hoping to empower 1 million people to give in some way to a person once a day with no strings attached. And the thing that I kept hearing more than anything was the doubt around, what is it that I have to offer a value to someone else? And I hear this at all stages of career. I especially hear it at early stages. And what we really, I think, take for granted is that we all have a network, we all have experiences, we all have skills. And sometimes our biggest gift to someone is just listening and asking and being that ear for them, because it's not something that people are accustomed to hearing, or just the gift of being that to them and being present in that moment is so big and can really be a game changer for people, even before they might have an ask for you, whether or not you can fulfill on it. So yeah, the worthiness thing is going to underpin all of the stuff that we've talked about.
Yeah, I have a mini rant on the giving without expecting anything in return, because it's something that I get asked this all the time, and I'm sure you guys do too, where it's like, well, how did you get that opportunity, or how did you meet that person, or how did you get involved with that, or why are you on that nonprofit board? How can I get on the board? I'm like, well, before the nonprofit existed, I showed up and I helped out. Like, I didn't ask to be on the board. I didn't do anything. The person was my friend. I showed up. He was doing like a special type of Airbnb type of thing where they're growing like fresh food in the lawn, like out in the yard around the house. And when it was still under construction, I went over and helped planted the vegetables, right? Like, just because he needed volunteers, and I was like, yeah, it sounds like a good time. And I get these questions, and I'm like, okay, well, this is what you need to do, and they're like, well, that seems like a lot of work, right? Like, I don't see the point. Like, and this is another one that popped up too. There's this dinner that I'm helping put together, and I've arranged some like live music, and I approached my friend, and I was like, hey, I know you just started playing gigs. We're having like a small thing there. There's going to be this person there that they book like house concerts around the Midwest. Like, this doesn't pay anything, but if they think that you do a really good job, there could be big opportunities down in the future. I mean, it's like 15 people. Would you want to come have dinner and maybe play a couple songs? And they're like, well, I need to get paid if I'm going to show up. I'm like, okay, so you haven't played any gigs. You are playing a couple gigs here and there. You haven't really got paid yet. And I'm putting an opportunity in front of you to like impress on someone that could open up way more doors than I ever could. And you're telling me that you are saying no because you want like $50 or $100 or something like that. Like, I can understand the starving artist thing, but I'm just like, man, like, you got to think long term a little bit. Yeah. Anyways, my mini rant's over. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other conversation potentially around how you value yourself and your time, and when you do things for free and when you don't. And I don't even think we have time to go into all of that today, but there's a whole conversation that can be had there too.
And a very, very important one.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that if you're an artist you should give your stuff away for free. I'm thinking about, like, if there's a goal or specific thing that you want to have, don't be afraid to like put yourself out there and to give a little bit and just have faith that it will come back around to help you out in the future.
Totally
Absolutely.
agree with that. Totally agree with that.
Yeah. So you guys mentioned something a little bit in the lead up conversation to the interview, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I just wanted to put it out there because you guys sounded like you had a lot of previous conversations on this, but relationships.
You're like, I'm just gonna leave that right there.
Yeah, I'm just gonna tee it up and let you guys go wherever you may.
I'll start it. What I think makes, and it's so interesting how Darrah and I met, and where this relationship with her, with her and me has just evolved to where we'll have these walking meetings, or we'll just meet for a glass of wine or have a phone conversation, and where what started as just a simple network connection has been born into what I believe is a very fruitful friendship and relationship, to where I feel when I talk to her about my intimate relationships, my relationship with my wife, or my relationship with a very close friend, or something that I'm struggling with, I think, Darrah, and I will say this about you: you show up, you listen, and you give non-judgmental advice. And sometimes that advice is tough. And to have people that you can lean on to talk about some of your boundary-driven, intimate discussions about relationships. And relationships are tough. They're work. Love is tough. What does love even mean? We have these society rules and boundaries and what we think is rights and wrongs and shouldas and couldas, wouldas. And to be able to have those conversations, even if you don't agree or you agree to disagree or whatever that might be, to be able to have those with the people that you can trust and people who have your best interest in heart and who are not there to judge you for whatever you might be talking about. I think it's super important, without going into the details of our conversations about our particular relationships, past relationships, current relationships, future relationships. But it's really super important to have those people in your life that you can have those conversations with. And so that's how I will lead this discussion off. How about that, Darrah?
That was beautiful. And I'm glad you started it. One, because I feel the same way. It's been so interesting to watch a relationship evolve. And it really is the foundation of what I expressed when I talk about networking and relationship building, that we use this word networking in a way that often feels transactional and tedious, versus I think networking is really just friendships and real relationships that you have in the world and people you really enjoy being around. And they're going to have different colors to them and different amounts of depth or closeness, and sometimes at different points in time. So to Tommy's point, when he and I met from a really pretty practical business networking standpoint, and to where our relationship is evolved, it's because both of us came to the table really open and ready to just let something become what it is. And, there's so much I could talk about relationships. To Tommy's earlier point, this is what I love and live and breathe, is helping give tactical advice on how to be someone who curates and manages a really robust and thriving network that helps you succeed in the way that you define that. And yeah, it's really important to have those people that can be those sounding boards, that are not just yes people, that are not just always making you feel good. Because I think, even in like the significant other situation, we hear that a lot in like wedding vows of, oh, you just make me so happy. And actually, I would venture to guess, I'm not married, but I am in a relationship, that is not necessarily a healthy way to look at any type of relationship. That you need to be able to have the hard conversations and do the tough work and not just look for all the highs all the time. And that's really important as well. But at the end of the day, for me, I believe that relationships of all shapes and forms, whether you call them your network, your friends, or whatever, are critical for your well-being and your success. And that if you're not tending to them, if you are not prioritizing them, you are doing yourself a huge disservice. And I think the last thing that I'll say about that is, do not wait until you need something to be looking for relationships in your world, or to be investing in the ones that you already have. It is too late at that point.
I think those are all great points, man. We could just have like a highlight reel of great advice coming out of this episode. So I had two things. One was, Tommy, this is a question for you. What makes Darrah such a good listener, and I guess what types of things make her, the way she approaches providing you feedback, so I want to say the word high quality, but that's not high quality. What makes you respect it so much? I will let you take my butchered question and try to make a nice answer out of it.
Oh, I totally got it, brother. Two things. Presence. She's there. She's not somewhere else. She's, I feel like whether we're walking down a path, and we have this really cool walking area in Atlanta called the Beltline that her and I sometimes take walks on, or we're sitting just on the floor of my living room. I feel that Darrah's there. She's in the moment. She's present with me, our relationship, and whatever we're talking about. And I think that's so critically important. She's not planning her next gig, and we're both extremely, extremely busy people, and I know you are as well, Trevor. But when we take the time to spend time with each other or on the phone, I feel like she's always 100% there. And she's with the relationship and our friendship in the moment that she's there. I think the second thing, it's just transparent and honest, even if it's something I don't want to hear. Some of those answers that she gave to those questions, it was very honest, and I know that I'm going to get Darrah. I'm not going to get some bullshit make me feel good answer that's going to make me, not going to lead me to where the desired result is. And I'm not talking about I don't expect anything from Darrah and vice versa. It just naturally works, and I can't explain that. But I know that whatever's coming out of her mouth, if I ask her a question and I feel comfortable asking her tough questions and putting myself out there and saying, here's some of the stuff I'm struggling with, I know that I know she's going to be there with me in total presence, which is hard to do for some of us. And second, I know I'm going to get very, very an honest answer, and I know it's going to come from a place of caring for my well-being and not from a place of judgment. And if you can find human beings like Darrah, love them. Hug them. Aww. Because it's so difficult in this life. I'm serious, though. That's what makes it special for me, and that's as honest and transparent as I can be.
That was really kind, and frankly, if I were to be asked it in reverse, it would be identical. So thank you.
This is why I enjoy talking with both of you guys, because I don't know. I've been getting goosebumps and also being a little bit of introspective as you guys are speaking, because even as you were making that point, Tommy, about being present in a conversation and just listening and not planning your next move as you are having a conversation with somebody that's important to you, I'm thinking back to maybe the last 5 or 10 conversations that I've had. And I'm how many of those conversations was I actually present in? How many of those conversations was I really just completely there for that person when they were sharing something with me, instead of thinking about what happened all day or what's coming up next? And I feel like I have a little bit of work to do in that department, but I think that's also great advice on how all of us can really listen a little bit better.
I think it'll change your this is not directed toward you, Trevor. I think all of us, and I think it's so critically important in business as well, especially for those of us who sell our brains and our wisdom or our expertise in whatever manner that might be. I think so many times we spend, especially when we're talking to a client or a customer or planning something, or we're constantly, when we're having those business or professional conversations, is we're either thinking about the next most clever thing to say or our next question, instead of just actually being there with that person and listening to what they have to say. I think if you can cultivate that practice, both professionally or personally, it will change your life. And Trevor, I'm with you, man. I call it the Tommy go round. I get in my own head sometimes. And so to breathe in it, put myself back in the situation and really hear what that human being, regardless of the situation, whether it's professionally or personally, being with that person right there in that moment, I think it could be life-changing for a lot of different people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm feeling like this would probably be a good time to start wrapping up the interview, because I want to respect both of your guys' time today, even though Tommy and I will be chatting more a little bit later. I got one final question for both of you, and that is, what message would you like to leave our audience with today? Darrah, you want to take first at bat for that?
Yeah, and I feel like there's so many things, but the first thing that comes to mind really takes us back to the introduction, which is question the norms, design your life with intention, believe that you can do it, surround yourself with the right people to support that, and then craft your career to finance it.
I totally agree with that. To add on to that, to a lot of the conversation I think that's outstanding advice. Know that you're not alone and whatever struggle that you have, and all of us have those insecurities and worthiness issues. Know that you are enough. Stop looking outside and start looking inside. And something a river raft told me, and I think we talked about this on another episode, Trevor, is participate in your own rescue. is literally put yourself out there, invest in yourself, take time for yourself and your well-being, and everything else will just kind of fall into place. If you can do what Darrah said and know that you're not alone in these thoughts and insecurities that you have, and really participate in your own rescue and invest in yourself, it will pay huge dividends in the future.
Well, folks, that's a wrap for this week's show. Big thanks for you to tuning in to this week's episode of The Formula, and a really big thank you to Darrah and Tommy. I really appreciate both of you, and I'm really grateful that you took the time to sit down and share your experiences with lifestyle design today. That's all for this week's show, and I look forward to you tuning in next time. This week's episode was sponsored by helixacademy.co, and the music was provided by the artist Moods. If you go into the show notes, you'll find a link to Moods' profile over on Spotify. Click on it and check out some of his other songs. He's got some really awesome beats over there. You're not going to regret it. Thanks, everyone.